Good morning, Commonwealth, and welcome to our March 18th meeting of the School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council, known as SCAAC. We are so glad you've decided to join us, and we're even more excited that it seems to be that spring is nearby. So we hope that everyone is getting ready for some beautiful spring weather. My name is Jana Beth Francis. I chair SCAAC, and so we're going to kick the meeting off with our roll call. To do that, I'll turn it over to Melissa Chandler, who keeps us all organized at KDE. Melissa?
Thanks, Jana Beth. And before I call roll, I'd like to provide some information for members about conducting meetings in a virtual setting. This meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. The public may view the meeting via the link provided in the public agenda, which was posted on the KDE website. SCAAC members must ensure that their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. Additionally, please keep microphones muted unless speaking, as all our discussions must be broadcast to the public. Each time you do speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause, and that will just give our software time to recognize you. We have a few standard agenda items that will require a vote today. We won't need a roll call vote for that, but we will vote by raising our hands or saying aye or nay. I'll also be taking minutes, and those will be shared with the general public on the KDE website when they're available. So now I'll get to roll. When I call your name, please make sure that your camera and mic are on, state your name, and indicate that you are present. And Jana Beth will need 9 members for a quorum. Artavia Acklin.
Artavia Acklin, present.
Heather Aldridge. And I know I've seen Heather on here, so we'll come back. Deborah Atherton.
Deborah Atherton, present.
Carrie Ballinger.
Present.
Houston Barber. Renee Boss. Martha Emmons. Chuck Fletcher. Jana Beth Francis.
Jana Beth Francis, present.
Frank Hall. Leslie Jeffries. Brenda McGowan.
Here, please pardon the background. The Homeowners Association has decided to clean gutters.
No problem. Jason Reeves.
Jason Reeves, present.
Allison Tammy. Josh Trosper. I think that's all.
Present.
Gotcha. Alan Young.
Present.
Okay, and it looks like we're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We just do have a quorum today, so we are good to go. Jana Beth.
Thank you so much, Melissa. So our next item is to review the agenda. And before you review the agenda, I'll just remind you that SCAAC was created to review, study, and make recommendations concerning anything related to Kentucky's academic standards, assessing learning, identifying academic competencies and deficiencies for our students, holding schools accountable for that learning, and assisting schools in improving their performance. And so take a moment to review the agenda. It looks like a great one. We're talking about math, the new exciting framework for accountability in Kentucky. We're going to hear from our commissioner, and we have a legislative update, as do most committees this time of year. And we'll hear a little bit about assessment and accountability updates as well. So what I want you to do now is in your folder, you should have had access to the November 2024 minutes. So take a moment to review those. To the general public watching, these will be available after the board approves the minutes. Melissa, do we need a motion to approve the minutes?
Yes, please, a motion, and then we'll just do a vote by raising our hand, aye or nay.
Heather Aldridge, I'll make a motion.
Thank you. A second to that?
Carrie Ballinger, I'll second.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, all in favor, raise your hand or say yay. Yay.
Yay.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Brenda. I see that virtual hand go up. Okay. Looks like we're good. I've got some more virtual hands going up. So the minutes have been approved. At this time, we are fortunate to have Robbie Fletcher, our commissioner, on. So Dr. Fletcher, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Janet Beth. I appreciate it. And again, thank you to each person that's serving on this committee. We really appreciate your time, especially this time of year. We're getting down to crunch time as the end of the year kind of comes around. But again, looking forward to some beautiful weather today. And again, it's just great to be back in classrooms, and almost it seems like we're getting back to normal with after all of our everything from flooding to wind to weather to. It's just great to see our students back in the classrooms. It has been a busy week already for the commissioner. As a matter of fact, I spent some time in Hardin County yesterday at Creekside Elementary, kicking off All In for Ag Week. So for your schools that are participating in All In for Ag, I recommend that you take that time to see what's going on in your elementaries. Very excited for what's going on there. And also thank you for Team KDE for the lesson planning that they put forth to help out with this week. Also, too, I was blessed to be able to participate. I actually moderated at the State Governor's Cup Academic Tournament this past weekend. That was great. Saw some wonderful students. Kids just seem to be smarter than they were when I was in Governor's Cup years ago. I'm just amazed by how fast and how quick they really are. And I also got to participate in the awards presentation last night. So, again, so many of your students I saw on stage, as a matter of fact, or in the competition, and I'm always very impressed with how well our students represent our schools. So again, congratulations to each person. If you had a family member or a student that were part of the state academic tournament this past weekend. Also, too, it's been a busy few, of course, last week was fast and furious, but tracking the legislators and all the actions that go on in our state legislature and the back and forth that you get to see, and sometimes you get to be a part of as commissioner of what's going on in the state legislature. But very thankful we have Dr. Perry give us an update today of all the movements of what bills moved, where they are as we are coming to a close, hopefully, with the legislative session. And then also, too, I'm very excited that you'll get to see Framework 3.0 today. So Dr. Stafford will be on board here with us today to talk about 3.0, and looking forward to your input and very excited at the point where we are now. Of course, this comes after our series of town hall meetings. We had published 2.0 with some input from our Cool Council, from SCAAC, and from others, and then also our SCAAC and other groups. And now you'll get to see 3.0 where we are now. Hopefully, we're within the home stretch of final versions before we go into the legislative session in 2026. So again, thank you to each person here today, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions that you may have, or you're welcome to email me at any time. So back over to you, Janet Beth.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. And just a shout out, I think Russell High School, Heather is on here, did exceptionally well at the state academic meet. So shout out to her district, and I'm an alum, so had to give that shout out, but we are so proud of all the students competing. And I'm so excited that you got to be a moderator and read some questions and help out with that. So we are going to turn our attention to one component of academics that I think is vitally important, and that is the Numeracy Counts Act, which work is really on kind of moving forward pretty rapidly. That's what I feel like in the district. We have Jennifer Fraley, who's the Director of Mathematics from the Office of Teaching and Learning. And I think Mickey Ray Marinelli is also on. So I'm going to turn it over to those ladies to present.
Thank you, Chair Francis. I just want to make sure everybody can hear me well. There's no echoes or anything like Dr. Fletcher was talking about. Okay, that is great. And yes, I do have our Chief Academic Officer, Mickey Ray Marinelli, with me, providing support as we go through this update. Of course, as you all know, she was instrumental in this work, and so I'm very blessed to have her as a mentor and a guide as we do roll out some of this very exciting work. So Numeracy Counts Act was a result of House Bill 162 in the last legislative session. I was very excited. I'm excited to speak with you all today for one reason, because when I was in the district, I was always watching the SCAAC meetings to learn more and to help me do my job more effectively. So it's really quite an honor to be here speaking with you all today and telling you a little bit about how this work from last year's legislative session has evolved. So I'm excited to be able to do that. Find my clicker there. So the name of our legislation, the Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act, is very intentional because we have to really understand what numeracy is. And while numeracy is explicitly defined in our statute, I think it's important that we lift out of that definition that it is not automaticity, it is not fluency. It is really about having those skills and competencies to flexibly use those strategies that we are learning in our math classes in all subdomains of mathematics. So as you look through that definition, you will see that yes, it starts with counting in kindergarten, but it also moves into all of those other domains at all grade levels. So it's not students just learning addition and then subtraction in one grade and then working on automaticity throughout their school career. It really is about students flexibly having the knowledge to use strategies to solve problems in all of those mathematics subdomains, from addition and subtraction all the way up to geometry, time, money, links, area, all of those things our students are working in numeracy. Math gets a bad rap, and some of you on this committee probably know that because you have spent a lot of time in that math space. You have probably heard students come to you and say, I don't like math, or I'm not a math person. And you may have even seen teachers, especially in the elementary levels in a self-contained environment where they absolutely love literacy, but they don't feel confident in their math skills. You've probably had parents come to you when you were having conversations about their students' performance, and they say, I can't help them in math. I just don't know math. And so we're really working with this Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act to dispel those myths and to help folks find the joy and the dispositions to actually love mathematics, because there are a lot of students who come to school specifically for the purpose of math. They love math. They love the problem solving. They love the challenges. And we have to help all of our students to have those feelings of joy. I love this graphic, and I want to challenge you just for a second in your mind. I'm not going to ask you to put anything in the chat or anything like that, but just in your mind, think about a time recently when you have used mathematics that you learned in school to solve a real life problem. And it may have been when you were eating out with your family and you were finding the amount of the gratuity. It may be when you are looking to do some remodeling in your house and you're thinking about how many square feet of flooring do I need. It may be when you are shopping and you've come across a really great sale and it's a certain percentage off and you're trying to figure out, is that really a good deal or not? So that is what this graphic is about. There is the mathematics that we learn in school. There is our daily life where we are flexibly and nimbly using mathematics to solve problems. And that intersection is really what numeracy is about, is making sure that our students are equipped with that mathematics knowledge to be able to solve those real life problems. As Chair Francis said, we have really come out of the gate fast with this work. And I'm going to touch on a few different aspects of the work that are very important in the K-12 environment. There are other aspects of the legislation that is pushing on some things with EPSB, with OELE. There are other areas that CPE is involved in. But today, I just want to tell you about the work in the K-12 world. First, and really foundationally, we had to have, and as I talk about some of this work, you're probably going to see parallels of literacy. So as you were watching the rollout of our early literacy work, and we talk about this rollout of numeracy, you're going to say, well, that sounds very similar to literacy, and that is very intentional. It is intentional so that those folks who are in districts can really do this work effectively. So they're not having to think about, so what is it we're doing for literacy, and what is it we have to do for numeracy, and how do I juggle all these components? So really, because that work in literacy was so strong and was so evidence-based, it is wonderful to have that pathway to follow with numeracy. So foundationally, as we think about building out a system of supports, a multi-tiered system of supports for our students and for our teachers, we really have to have in place those foundational assessments. And so just like we did with literacy, we are identifying a list, a published list of universal screeners that we use with students at least 3 times a year to identify if they are on track to proficiency, as well as diagnostics. And those diagnostics are assessments that we use with students after they have taken that universal screener to identify if the universal screener throws up some flags and says, whoa, this student is having some problems around place value, then we can use diagnostics to dig deeper to find out why that gap is occurring and what we can do with interventions in order to support those students. So that list is published on our Kentucky Numeracy Counts webpage. I want to insert a caveat here, and we're really lucky that we started this work early. As Chair Francis said, a lot has happened, but because of the fact that districts do not have to identify the screener and diagnostic that they will be using until January of 2026, then we have a little bit of time here to continue to look for those mathematics assessments that we feel are, or that we actually prove to be reliable, valid, and to have that classification accuracy. So the world of mathematics assessments is kind of sparse because of the fact that so much effort has been put on literacy these past few years. The science of reading really opened the doors for a lot of work around literacy assessments. And so we're finding that assessment vendors are just now getting caught up with some of the work that is going on in numeracy. And as I have been working with other state leaders around mathematics, they are also seeing the challenges of having a really robust list of those assessments. And so I feel good that we have identified the ones that we have, and we are continuing to look for those. And so we have put a little disclaimer on the website that tells folks that we are continuing to look for those assessments, and the list will be revised and added to as we identify those assessments that have that criteria that we are looking for. I have a couple other slides that will talk about our professional learning academies, but for this little row here, the second row, I will just tell you that we do have 2 of our professional learning academies that are up and going, and we have 2 where applications for participation actually opened yesterday. So I will tell you a little bit more about those. Also, our grant application for high quality instructional resource and curriculum-based professional learning to award 40 districts about $70,000 apiece. That application has closed, and we began training our external reviewers, and they begin their work next week. So it will be exciting to have those districts awarded. And then the last, ideally, we would hope that all elementary schools already have in place a high quality instructional resource, and they are using that with their students for that coherence and that clarity in instruction. But our legislation does say that they will have that in place no later than January of 2026. And the department is sharing a list of those approved resources so that districts have that list to start from. And I really love that we're able to provide that list, but then also with all of the other guidance that the department has created. I was in that space last year and the year before in the district, using those resources to bring together teams of teachers, community members, administrators to really review those instructional resources that we were considering and think about our own local context as we made decisions about what high quality instructional resources would best fit our students. So that is also included in the legislation. I think it's important that we pay attention to the details around our statute around the use of those universal screeners and diagnostics. So beginning in the 26-27 school year, in January, our districts will select those screeners and diagnostics. And then they have that window between January and the start of their 26-27 school year to ensure that all of their staff have training on those assessments. We want to make sure that they understand how to use the assessments, how to use the data, and how to make instructional decisions based on those assessments. So they will select that universal screener, they will select that diagnostic, they will ensure that all of their teachers in K-3 are trained on those mathematics screeners and diagnostics, and they will also adopt that high quality instructional resource. So all of that is defined for us in statute. It is also defined in our implementation guidance that a lot of our districts use as their guide through this work. As we are looking at that universal screener, within this again parallels the literacy work. That screener beginning in the 26-27 school year will be given in the first 30 calendar days of the school year for students in grades kindergarten through 3rd grade. And then those students, because of the results of the screener, if they are identified as being at risk for not meeting grade level benchmarks, then they will be given that diagnostic assessment to really dig in and understand more about where that student's learning is. And that diagnostic should be given within the first 45 days of the school year. And then we will support schools and districts in the development of a mathematics improvement plan that would then be implemented in the first 60 calendar days of the school year for any student who is in grades K through 3 who need those accelerated interventions to progress toward proficiency. This follows along exactly like literacy, and if a student already has a 504 or an IEP that has those mathematics goals spelled out, then that additional mathematics improvement plan would not be necessary. But we want to make sure that we are naming and claiming those students and that we really know who those students are, and we have developed a plan for their improvement that also includes their families. And that is another reason why this numeracy work is so important, is because if families are coming to us and saying, I'm not a math person and I can't help my child with mathematics, then we really need to make sure that we are providing the support and resources for those families to also learn and find that joy in that numeracy work. So going on to our professional learning academies, as I said, there are 2 that are up and going. One of them is the EPIC Numeracy Alliance. This is 200 teachers across the state of Kentucky that are participating in this professional learning opportunity with some really great goals of being able to learn together, to being able to learn individually, to have some time to increase their own content knowledge and pedagogy, to work within a community of practice, and to also benefit from some customized coaching. So the EPIC Numeracy Alliance, they are trying out, they are piloting the Carnegie Learning program called Patterns. It is a professional learning program for teachers in grades 3 through 8. Teachers in grades 3 through 5 are being trained in early fraction concepts, and teachers in grades 6 through 8 are being trained in proportional reasoning. And if you're familiar with the standards, you would agree that those are very important bands of standards throughout those grade level Kentucky Academic Standards. One of the things that EPIC noticed very early on was that administrators were coming to their face-to-face sessions with their teachers to support them in this work. The leaders wanted to know more about how to help their teachers with mathematics. And so EPIC actually created an additional cohort for the instructional leaders. And so sometimes when those teachers are doing things that are more teacher specific in their meetings, the leaders come together to really plan for that support. That program, as I said, is already up and going. It's been going since early in the fall. But if you have questions about that, or you want to know more about it, you could absolutely reach out to me, or Rebecca Gaddy and Audrey Harper are the folks that are leading that work. And I think you probably know who those ladies are. Another professional learning academy that we have up and going, and this is another familiar name to you from Advanced Kentucky, is our Access to Algebra program, which is working to support middle grades in teaching that high school algebra content at the middle school level. And while you don't need Advanced Kentucky to do that work, they sure are very helpful, because a lot of schools have tried this and realized that it is quite a lift, and they've either scaled it way back or they have just kind of stopped doing it altogether. Advanced Kentucky comes in, they work alongside the teachers to really look at what that curriculum looks like to teach 6th grade standards, 7th grade standards, 8th grade standards, and high school algebra standards, all in those middle grades in those 3 years. They also provide some incentives for teachers and students for learning and for progression. Using the results of the PSAT, teachers who meet their class growth goals and students who meet their individual goals are awarded with financial incentives at the end of the year. So they actually get a check. And I don't know too many middle school kids who aren't excited to get a check. As we look at what Kentucky Numeracy Counts has been able to help Advanced Kentucky with, they have been able to add 19 additional sites through funds by Kentucky Numeracy Counts. So that brings their total to 28 sites that we'll be implementing in the 25-26 school year. And I feel certain that those school districts are going to feel success with those coaches working alongside of them from Advanced Kentucky. If you have questions about access to algebra or anything around Advanced Kentucky, Anthony Myers is their executive director, and Annette Williams is the program director for Access to Algebra. Another academy that we are getting ready to launch in the summer, and as I said, applications opened for it yesterday, and at the end of the day yesterday, we had already over 100 applications. So folks have been anticipating this. It is the Kentucky Center for Mathematics K-5 Teacher Academy. So this will launch in July with a face-to-face launch with over 1,000 teachers from across Kentucky. So they will be participating in 6 research-based modules. Very important to note that this work is intentionally going to support teachers in the use of their adopted HQIR. But you don't want to bring teachers in and talk about best practices and talk about activities in the absence of their HQIR. We really want them looking at that resource to see why that HQIR is outlined the way that it is. And to understand why those questions are there for the teacher to ask the students, why those ideas for discourse are there to give students those topics to talk to each other about. We really want them to understand why their HQIR is developed the way it is so that they are getting the most use out of that HQIR. It will be a very collegial and collaborative work. Those folks will only come together for face-to-face meetings in the summer. The rest of the time, their meetings will happen synchronously and asynchronously through an online platform with a coach. with a facilitator who is there to support those teachers, to help them to say, I see you're a little bit behind. What can I do to help you get caught up? Or to give them ideas about additional things they can do in their classrooms. So having that coaching component is going to be so important. All of the modules are developed by Kentucky educators with the expert support of Dr. Jennifer Bay Williams and Dr. Kate Marin from the University of Louisville. So it will focus specifically on the Kentucky academic standards and those standards for mathematical practice. Also, it will be lifting out those NCTM effective math teaching practices, really looking at fluency and coherence and progression of standards across grade levels. So that third grade teacher is going to be able to see what did the students get in K1 and 2 leading up to where I'm doing this work, and then they'll be able to see what is that fourth grade teacher going to be doing with this as well. So to really understand that progression, and then also to have, again, that connection to their HQIR. Applications for this academy will close on May the 1st. We anticipate accepting about 125 teachers across 8 launch sites. Those folks being encouraged to apply are classroom teachers, special education teachers, interventionists, instructional coaches, all of those folks that are working with math in our school system. The applications are available at the KCM website, and that map is just showing you where those 8 locations will be for those face-to-face launch meetings. Those folks will have a lot of fun in that launch meeting. They're going to receive a box of resources that is aligned to their modules so that they have all of the manipulatives and all of the resources and all of the tools that they need to be able to implement what they learn in their modules. If folks have questions about this, if they want to know more as they think about who are going to be the best people from our district or our schools to apply, or I want to know more about participation, or could I come along and be an observer, all of those questions can be channeled through Kelly DeLong Stone, who is the KCM Executive Director. And then another piece of our academy puzzle that I am very, very happy about, and I will say that as we've talked with other states about this work, they are a bit envious of, is the fact that we also have an administrator academy. Because anytime we're talking about an in-depth teacher professional learning experience, like a 2-year professional learning academy being offered by KCM, it's sometimes not feasible to think about an administrator being able to attend alongside a teacher. They cannot be out that much. They cannot dedicate that much time to this work because of their other obligations. So being able to have an administrator academy that runs alongside the KCM Teacher Academy to share with them, this is what your teachers are learning in the Teacher Academy, and this is how you can best support them in that work in the school, so that that principal or that district administrator understands what that work looks like, and that they are not taking the teacher away from that initiative, that they're helping them to actually implement those things in their classroom. So the Administrator Academy kind of has 3 broad goals to provide that math-specific professional learning for administrators. Administrators don't always get training in math-specific content and pedagogy. So being able to have that opportunity is new, and it is a wonderful benefit of the Kentucky Numeracy Counts Act to be able to support and build a high-quality mathematics program in their schools and districts, and then to be able to understand a lot of different data points, whether it be from classroom look-fors to those assessment data, but being able to take all of that data that we have about our math program and make those instructional informed decisions. PIMSR will, as I said, these will be face-to-face meetings, and so they're starting out with their first meeting this summer happening in 2 locations. So 250 administrators will be selected for this cohort, and they will decide, do they want to attend the Lexington session or the Bowling Green session, with Lexington happening June 2nd and 3rd, Bowling Green June 11th and 12th. Then for the remainder of the sessions, we will have them spread across 4 locations so folks don't have as far to travel, and with Eddyville and Ashland coming into the mix. If you have questions about that work, you are encouraged to reach out to Dr. Zeidler Waters, who is the executive director of PIMSR. So she is the one providing, helping to develop that academy. I'm leaving you also in your PowerPoint, your resources, some links to some other key resources. If you really are interested in all of the language of the bill, it is actually linked there, but also that implementation guidance I was telling you about that districts are finding very helpful, kind of summarizes the intent and the moving pieces of that legislation. And then also a link to our Kentucky Numeracy Counts webpage. And I want to really quickly tell you that last week was our first edition of our Kentucky Numeracy Counts monthly newsletter. And if you did not receive that or you're interested in receiving it, if you go to our Kentucky Numeracy Counts webpage, there is a link to where you can subscribe to our numeracy monthly newsletter. And I'm hoping that you will to use that as a way to stay in touch with this work, because there's lots of exciting things going on. And then I'm also leaving you with my email so that if you have any questions or want to have some conversations about any of this work, that you're able to reach me. So I will stop here, and I know there may be questions, and Mickey is here with me as well.
First of all, Jennifer, wow, it was great to really, I've been following this grant, and I will have to tell you what I loved about your presentation today was put it all in one thing. And I was like, okay, this is perfect. In fact, it was great timing for me because my board has asked me to present on numeracy this Thursday night. So wonderful work. But I do want to start with a couple things. First of all, I'm so glad you highlighted the HQIR adoption resources. And shout out to Mickey's team for the incredible resources. More and more people, because of this grant and the work around reading, are going to those resources and really finding them useful. I was just talking to principals last week about lesson internalization and unit internalization. So those tools are all in one spot and really great to see. My other thing is I'm thrilled that the screener and diagnostic list are going to continue to grow. I know you probably got the panic from districts on the first round. And so we as SCAAC members, especially those that are connected to districts, will start spreading the word. Just keep checking back on the website and all of that. But my request is, I loved what you said when you talked about the math intervention plans of getting the families involved. And this may be in the works already, but one of the biggest things that we have heard through the reading improvement plans have been how much families have appreciated the family guide that came out. And I'm hoping you all are thinking about doing something similar for math.
Yes, we are, absolutely, Chair Francis. We are thinking about that, and we're taking those lessons learned from literacy, really thinking about how can we make this improvement plan something that is usable and durable and works with those students, and really thinking about how we can provide lots of tools and resources for those families. Thinking about maybe little just super short video clips, 30 seconds, a minute, showing a family doing something that is helping that child in a certain area of mathematics. But then also thinking about those, I'm in Eastern Kentucky, and sometimes internet is a challenge for families. And so then how can we have those print resources that families can be using? How can we point them to things that they can be using as manipulative so they don't have to go to the teacher store and buy counting blocks and cubes and all of those things? So how are we helping to provide lots of resources that meet the needs of lots of different families?
That's great to hear, because like I said, we have just received rave reviews about the literacy one for reading. And so I'm excited to hear we're looking at lessons learned and improving that. At this time, I'll open it up to any questions for Jennifer or Mickey. Alan, you have a question or a statement?
Trying to find my mic. Thank you. Thank you for that presentation this morning. I appreciate it. There's nothing in it that I find that's a problem. But I want to talk a little bit about maybe what also might be there but is not played up enough in my view, or if it's not there, maybe should be more. And it's the notion of not just valid and reliable, but authentic. And I think your Venn diagram really captured the notion of numeracy that I understand, which is how do we do this and show how the usability of math and mathematical thinking and seeing myself in a way that's empowered is really important. And it's important to have really good resources. There's no doubt about it. But I worry that sometimes our stress on showing through diagnoses and through other tests may miss or may inhibit the trying of math in all kinds of areas that it's really there in, and we make it so, try to get it ready for you demonstrating it on a particular kind of test, when I'd rather see if kids can use it in a real world way. And how can we capture those things in our system, like we're trying to do with our whole United We Learn, with our 3.0 framework? What kinds of things can we utilize to be able to show kids are demonstrating proficiency and usability in real world ways that are not just on tests, so that they can also stay engaged and want to use math and not be so fearful of it, but actually, be friends with it in ways. And I know that there's got to be stuff that's all in there, but I'd love to see that more as a notion of having kids and parents. I know a lot of parents are fearful of math and they have not done things. And so this notion of engaging and finding it authentic and practical, I think, is really an important part to play up. And so I'll let you speak on that a little bit, but I just wanted to hear about that.
Right. I do appreciate that feedback, and I do need to I need to lift that out more when we talk about assessment, because we do have opportunities in our schools and districts to use more of those informal assessments to really understand our students' thinking, to really understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. There's an entire suite of kind of fluency assessments that KCM has, but you sit side by side with the child and you're really asking them, why did they solve that problem that way? Is there another way that they could have solved it? And really understanding their thinking. And I do believe that that's the kind of assessment that we also want to support our schools and districts in implementing, alongside those assessments that we give, so that we have that valid data to make some decisions about interventions. But if I'm a classroom teacher, I want to use my formative assessment strategies to really understand what that student is doing and why they are doing it, because that tells me where to go with my instruction. And so I think we do have to support some of those. Informal doesn't mean less quality, but using those informal assessments to help drive what is going on in that classroom and what we do with that individual student. So we will be providing a lot of support to districts around that, and we do encourage them to use those other informal assessments. Just like with literacy, when I was in the district, we had our screener and we had our diagnostic, but we used a lot of other assessments, like we used core phonics and UFly to help us provide more tailored support to our students, because we still needed more data than what that screener and that diagnostic was giving us. So we do need to elevate that and make sure that folks recognize there are absolutely real, authentic ways of assessing student learning that probably tell us more about how that child is thinking than what they're doing on a diagnostic. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Josh, you have your hand raised?
Yes, Josh Strasper. My only question was, with the possibility of this new accountability system, does the assessments in this act line up with where we're looking to move, or will there need to be changes made if that passes?
So Dr. Fraley, I will take that one. I think that the current assessments, both in the Read to Succeed Act and the Numeracy Counts Act, are very specifically created to support the multi-tiered system of support. And so being able to identify which students are needing intentional instruction and intervention beyond the tier 1 space. And so that was the charge. We were working to ensure that students were identified early to provide them additional support so that they could make accelerated progress toward proficiency. I think many of the beautiful conversations that are happening in the United We Learn space and around Framework 3.0 also point to interim assessments. So I think some of that is still to be determined, but I don't think that they are working in opposite ways. I think that they're all intended to support schools and districts in knowing how to best serve students at an individual personalized level. And to me, that's very powerful.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Any other questions? Oh, Alan?
Sorry, one last one. The other part, I appreciate the last comments and questions as well, because I think the assessments need to also match all the different ways we see kids demonstrating and showing their work. And sometimes kids either freeze up or actually aren't able to show it as well on the things that we want to have to compare them to each other versus the things that compare them to the real standards and competencies we're asking. The other question I have, and I think it's an area to explore more growth in, is the relationship between our portrait of a learner and all of those particular 6 competencies and how numeracy can play an vital part in an empowered learner, in a creative contributor, in a critical thinker. And so I'm going to always be advocating that we move beyond standards, which are, I think, a smaller grain size. They're not unimportant, but as a kid experiences these things, and as teachers need to design learning experiences for whole children, they have to have the space and place to be able to apply these things in real world ways and to themselves so that they are actually really leaving, not just showing it on a test and then 3 weeks later can't demonstrate it, but they are actually internalizing these capacities and capabilities. And so I'd like to hear a little bit more about any plans about integrating this with the profile of a learner as well.
Mr. Young, I think the beautiful thing is that we are absolutely seeing that in the early literacy space. So there are many districts who made very intentional choices around the instructional resource that they're using that aligns with local initiatives and their local portraits of a learner. I would say there are many district leaders on this call with us today who are taking really large steps in supporting students around demonstrating the competencies that have been identified, the elements of a portrait of a learner that they want demonstrated really well beyond just the K-3 space, but K-12 aligned to reading and writing instruction. And I believe that will happen in numeracy and for mathematics as well. We will work very intentionally to capture bright spots. I think about some of the amazing things that are happening in Rowan County, for example. Like they have identified elements of their portrait of a learner. They have embedded a high quality instructional resource that is very much aligned, and now their students are engaging in vibrant experiences that show their capacities toward their portrait of a learner. And that's just one example. So there are many, many more that we could discuss today. And that is an area of concern for Dr. Fraley and myself as well, so that we are showing a full picture of providing access to grade level learning using that HQAR, but going above and beyond that to ensure that students have access to vibrant experiences as well and multiple opportunities to demonstrate the learning that is happening at that grade level.
And I would also add that our standards for mathematical practice also align really closely with those skills that we want to see students demonstrating in that portrait of a learner. So as we think about making sense of problems and persevering to solve them and modeling with mathematics and being able to apply different tools strategically, all of those standards for mathematical practice align really closely to those skills. So it's important that our teachers understand the importance of those standards for mathematical practice, and they're giving students the opportunity to demonstrate those skills in their learning.
Well, it's definitely something to keep an eye out for. And I would echo what was just said about, I think districts are really looking for where to cross those. And I love what you said, Alan, about making sure we keep looking at the whole child when we consider things. So thank you both. So remember, you can reach out to Dr. Fraley with any questions. She's given you plenty of information. All of the links are active. If you go to your PowerPoint slides, and you'll be able to get to that information, and do encourage educators to start thinking about numeracy. And with any student you love or get to come across, don't forget to ask them a good math question every now and then to get their brain in that space where we live with mathematics. So at this time, we're going to jump down to item 7 on the agenda. Brian Perry is here to give us a legislative update. Dr. Perry.
Thanks. Next slide. Not sure who's. Can I? Oh, okay. So we are in the veto period. So right now the governor has about a week or so to take action on the bills that have reached his desk to this point. He can sign those into law. He can let them become law without a signature, or he can veto them. The General Assembly will return on the end of the month on the 29th and 30th for their final 2 legislative days, at which time they can override vetoes. It takes a simple majority in each chamber. So with the supermajorities, it's likely that any vetoes that the governor issues will be overturned when they return. With that said, they can also still pass some bills late in the session and send those to the governor for action. However, they'll be out of days once they adjourn sine die. So any vetoes at that point would stand. So as you'll see here in a few minutes, there's several bills that are still kind of working their way through the process and might get sent to the governor for action once they return. So I don't know if I can do this. Oh, yeah. There's just some resources in case you don't know how to follow along with the session. Everything gets streamed either on KET or on the LRC website. And then there's the link to all of the bills that they filed. So this is a short session, so no budget this year, but otherwise these off-year sessions have really morphed into just regular sessions minus the budget. They originally were intended to be cleanup sessions where a limited number of bills, really just kind of cleaning up things that they have done previously. They've totally gotten away from that. These are just regular sessions now. We flagged about 200 bills out of the gate. Obviously not all of those moved, but an awful lot of education-related legislation has been moving. So a busy short session. Just want to make sure that you all were aware that there was a big change in the House prior to the session starting. The leadership in the House split the Education Committee, so we now have a primary and secondary education committee, as well as a post-secondary education committee. I'm not totally sure why they did this, but very happy to see Representative Scott Lewis chair the committee that we work with the most. It's primary and secondary. He's a former superintendent from Hancock and Ohio counties. Has been a very strong supporter of public education. So very happy to see him in his new role. And then Representative Tipton, the former chair of the singular education committee, is taking care of the post-secondary committee. So we're still real involved with him. But anyway, just want to make sure you all were aware that that change had taken place. And just for your reference, there are all the current members of the committees. Again, just reference for you all. Then we'll get into some legislation. So I've kind of broken these into kind of where they are in the process. So these are the ones that have been signed as of yesterday. I did not have time to go through this morning and see if he took action on any of the other ones that are on here. So he may have signed some yesterday that I haven't caught yet. Obviously, really only one of these is singularly focused on education. There's several administrative bills this session. I'm not going to highlight those for you all. I don't know that you all have much interest in those. Kind continue to see some kind of what I think of as misconduct bills. So 73 there is one of those, trying to kind of address issues that we see within schools. There's a few others that are out there as well that haven't made it to the governor yet. And then the evaluation of education prep programs is one that we asked for. This was just some cleanup language that moved the responsibility from CPE to EPSB. So happy to see that one get done. So the governor has a long list of bills. I think they said 60 some odd bills reached him so far. A big chunk of those are related to education. So not going to talk about all of these because would take quite a while, and I don't know how interested you are. There's one in particular that we'll get to that I think is going to be of most interest to this group, and so we'll try to get there quickly. So on this one, House Bill 193 just cleans up the dual credit scholarship language. Finally, this is a bill that has been filed literally every year that I worked in Frankfurt. I think this is my 8th legislative session. A surprise to see this one finally get done after all these years, but I think it's a good change for students. It gets us down to just having a dual credit scholarship and a work-ready Kentucky scholarship for adults. Makes it a little easier for students and their families, especially on the dual credit side, to understand what scholarships are available and how to use them. So glad to see that one get done. House Bill 208 was one that we were expecting. It's the cell phone ban bill. This has been a topic of conversation throughout the interim. So we were expecting this bill and are supportive of it. We've seen this get filed in some surrounding states, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive, including from students. We heard testimony, about teachers and parents hearing from students about how kind of relieved they were once they got past the initial shock of the bans going into place. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out and to see if we kind of see the same feedback from our districts here in Kentucky. House Bill 240, potentially one of the more controversial ones. It's a holdback bill. So this started out as a kindergarten holdback bill. It got amended, as almost every bill did this session and last session, got amended along the way. It's now permissive at kindergarten for holdback if the student is not on grade level at the end of the year, and mandatory for the first graders that are not on grade level by the end of the year to be held back for a year. Again, this is, I think, a reaction in part to the conversations we've been having about hitting those third grade benchmarks that are so critical. Making sure students are reading on grade level by grade 3. I think they've taken that to heart, as you see with this one, really focused on early intervention and trying to make sure that once we get to that first major milestone, we have kids on grade level and ready to succeed for the rest of their school. Moving down, House Bill 241 is a little bit of a complicated one because it, again, got amended along the way in a very big way. So this started out as a kind of disaster relief bill. We've had a very strange school year in terms of weather. We had the I-75 shooter. We had a hurricane day, if you can believe that, back in the early part of the year. So just a lot of things that have been disruptive to school districts across the state. And then more recently, we've had the flooding in Eastern Kentucky. Still have districts recovering from that. So this was a really important bill to help districts adjust their calendars and provide some additional relief. Now, switching gears for a second, you've probably heard some conversations about virtual programs, in particular, one district that has a virtual program that has just skyrocketed in enrollment, got up over 3,000 students at one point back in the fall. So there was some talk on our side of, well, what do we do about this, right? So we proposed a cap based on all the other virtual programs that are operating in the state and their relationship to their in-person enrollment. And so none of those existing programs, except this one, are anywhere near 10% of their in-person enrollment. The next biggest ones are like 6 or 7%. So we proposed putting a 10% cap in place for full-time virtual programs. That was through an administrative reg process. The General Assembly decided not to adopt that. And so instead, they filed a piece of legislation that kind of directs the department to essentially be hands-off with that one program for quite a while. That all got added into House Bill 241. So now we have the district relief portion as well as some language around virtual programming. Unfortunately, they made it pretty complex in how we're supposed to monitor this. So it's going to limit in-person enrollment in full-time virtual programs to 2% of the statewide population. It's complicated. We're still working through how we're going to do this. There's some exceptions for siblings that are in full-time virtual programs, the students of full active military, and then those that have a doctor's note that says they require full-time virtual programming. So we're still working through how we're going to kind of manage all of that, but we'll figure it out.
Barry, I will add one thing. One
Sure.
other issue with this is, you have an outside company that's running this program, and they receive 97% of the funds that are gained by virtual programs. So last year alone, this company got $4.28 million, $4.6 million, whereas the district got $250,000. So that money goes straight out. Now, this also, the increase of this district in funds from 1.6 million in their first year now is over 15.8 million. So that increase, 97% of that will go to this outside company. So a lot of issues there as we move forward, and we try to do a 10% cap, and that was denied. But again, and you can watch the Senate Education Committee meeting. It was actually broadcast in that meeting that they felt, due to how policy works, that they needed to add this 268 to 241 in order to get the votes for it to pass. So again, that was a public in the public comments there and statements. So I'm not saying anything. It was behind closed doors. So again, this is something that this bill actually puts a 1% cap statewide for non-residential virtual students that we have to monitor, and actually put a, when it gets to 0.085%, we have to publish that. We have to tell people they got to keep from taking students unless they have a sibling, a military student, or if they have a doctor's note that allows them into a virtual program. So there's a little bit of red tape that's been created here that we'll have to navigate over the next little bit. As a matter of fact, it's a lot of red tape as we go forward. So this is one that really kind of hits home for all of us. And we are not allowed to put a cap unless they are in the bottom 5% over the next 3 years on this group. So could possibly get up to around 6,000 students. Well, probably less than that, because you look at other virtual programs across the state, and we have to get the number on that also too. So again, that's a little bit more on 241. Dr. Perry did a great job of giving a synopsis, but I did want to give a little bit more information on that one.
Thank you,
Go ahead,
Commissioner. And so just as a reminder, when I mentioned the vetoes, I should have said this. The governor only has line item veto power in the budget bill. So with these, it's all or nothing, right? So unfortunately, he can't, in this case, he can't veto part of 241. It's all or nothing. So keep that in mind as you see those vetoes or not coming out. Moving down the list, 298 is a priority bill for the department this year. This is going back to annual identification for CSI status. So a few years ago, they changed it to every 3 years. In the meantime, our Office of Continuous Improvement and Support was going ahead and running the list as they would have if we were identifying CSI schools. Obviously, those new schools, would have come into the fold as CSI. We were reaching out to those and saying, hey, you would have been CSI. Would you like us to come and offer any kind of support? We only had, I think, 2 districts out of 34 or so that responded. And I think that caught the attention of some legislators. And that's part of the reason that they were supportive of us going back to annual identification. Moving on down, 342 is a financial literacy bill. Obviously, there's been some talk about financial literacy, but it will make it a graduation requirement. You see another administrative regs bill there. We will skip over that one. 566, I'm going to skip over that one. It relates to charitable gaming in school districts, or a part of it does. And then you see that, and we always have TRS bills floating around. So we'll move on to the ones I think this group's more interested in. Senate Bill 4 is another one that was not much of a surprise. There's been a lot of talk about AI over the past year. Last year, we saw Senator Thomas in Lexington file essentially an omnibus bill on AI. It really kicked off the conversation. SREB came out with their AI recommendations in the fall. So Senate Bill 4 is sort of what I would think will be the first of several AI bills that we'll see over the next few sessions. Senate Bill 19 started off as a moment for requiring a moment of silence and reflection. It's permissive now. Districts can do this already. It got folded into that another bill that allows for moral instruction 1 hour a week, and provides some stipulations for that. That's permissive. Students and parents can opt in, districts can opt in. Obviously, I think there's some concern on our end about the disruption, an hour a week of non-academic instruction could cause. So we'll see how that kind of plays out. I will note that districts are doing this already. I don't know that it's as frequent as that. I think some districts are doing it more on the order of once a month or so. But we'll see how it plays out. Senate Bill 68 was a cleanup bill. From our standpoint, was going to get rid of 2 required reports from the department that are just outdated. One of those got put back in, so we got rid of 1 report and cleaned up some language with 68. So glad to see it get done. Moving on down, 77 clarified some members of the EPSB from the independent colleges and universities, and really specifying that we wanted folks related to their education prep programs. So again, glad to see that one get done. And then finally, we'll get down to Senate Bill 207. And this is the one I think that you are going to have the most interest in. And I'm glad Mickey's on here because she can chime in, because this is one that she worked on throughout the session. So this started off as half of Senate Bill 5. Senate Bill 5, again, kind of one of the top priority bills for the Senate. The sponsor pulled out this part of the bill and filed it as 207, and that's what ended up moving. It moves the idea of schools of innovation. This is something we've heard about for a couple of years now. We had some legislators visit a school of innovation at a conference a few years ago. We've had districts of innovation on the books for some number of years now. And this really doesn't allow for anything new, but it does move it down to having schools of innovation. So we don't have to have a district-wide. Now you can have a single school within a district be designated as a school of innovation, and allow for some flexibility there. The other part of this that got added in was some language that we had been advocating for over the interim, which was a cleanup to the state textbook commission language. So the state textbook commission had gone defunct back around 2017 when it was no longer funded. In the meantime, Mickey and her team kind of reimagined what that would look like, and that has been moving along. But we had a report come out last summer that essentially said, we either need to get the statutory language cleaned up to mirror what's happening, or KDE needs to go back and kind of do what the statutory language currently says, which is revolves around the state textbook commission. Thankfully, we saw this get cleaned up in 207. It will create the State Quality Curriculum Task Force, which again is that group that I think Mickey's team has already sort of set in place in the years since the textbook commission got defunded. It'll also set up a repository for HQIRs that group will point to. So those will be green rated resources that are at least 80% aligned to the Kentucky academic standards. Districts will be able to select from those. Once they're in the repository, external stakeholders like parents and community members will be able to see all the curriculum in its entirety. So that'll be helpful. We'll also get testing data back. So if a district were to pilot a new program or a new curriculum that they're working with someone on, we will be able to see kind of what's working, what's not working. That part's going to be exciting. It will require districts to use these high quality instructional resources. It also, now there's no funding attached to this bill because we're not in a budget year. However, it does include language that will permit the commissioner to purchase instructional materials for districts. So we are hopeful that we will see an appropriation next year that addresses that part of this. But in the meantime, glad to see this statutory language get cleaned up. That's the real quick version. I'll turn it over to Mickey and let her have a more detailed conversation with you about this one, because I'm sure you all are interested in it.
Oh, Brian, I think you did an amazing job, and you'll have to forgive me. My granny ears hear so much better with these headphones, but I just wanted to add that the off-list notification, so 158.445 is still allowable in this. And we think that's very important because we don't want to hinder districts from being able to be innovative. But we also want to ensure that the resources that are approved through the Quality Curriculum Task Force are truly going to have the best potential to support student learning. And so as it so happens, Chair Francis is also on our Quality Curriculum Task Force and has been working in that committee for many, many years. And so this is our chance to ensure that we are in compliance with the statutes and that the process we're following will lead to better supports for schools and districts in the adoption space. So grateful for the ability to have that repository and the transparency that would be allowable there for families, communities, and educators as they're considering which resources to purchase. But Brian, you did an awesome job explaining that. And if there are any questions, happy to address those.
Any questions on 207? If not, we can move along. You all have got lots of other stuff on the agenda, so. All right, so those are all the bills that have been delivered to the governor thus far. Again, he has till the end of the veto period to take action on all those. I would suspect if we see any vetoes, those will be quickly overturned once they return. So we have a few bills that have essentially been voted out of both chambers, but haven't made it to the governor's desk because of going back to the original chamber for concurrence. So with House Bill 48, for example, it passes out of the House. In one form, it goes over to the Senate makes some changes. They voted out of their chamber. It has to then go back to the House for the House to either agree or disagree with the changes that the Senate made to their bill. So that's where all of these are. Senate Bill or House Bill 48 is a so-called red tape reduction bill. We've been working on this one since it got filed. Saw some changes get made, thankfully, as I went through this process. Not really sure why it didn't go to I thought this one would go to the governor before the veto period. So a little surprised there. I don't know that the rest of these are anything of great interest to this particular group. I will say that joint resolution there at the bottom is the gap funding for some districts. So if you happen to be one of those districts, that's might be of interest to you. And then these are ones that have passed out of the first chamber. And I highlight these because they could still go to the governor for action when they return, but more because I think that these are things we're going to either talk about during the interim or see get reintroduced again next year. It's not unusual at all to see a bill that passes out of the chamber the first time to come back for another session or two before it gets across the finish line. So just sort of putting these on the radar for folks. Again, I don't know if anything here that jumps out at me. The reading and writing in schools was a dysgraphia bill. I never get the second part right. Then House Bill 190 may be of interest. It was really pushing students into advanced coursework or trying to get students into more advanced coursework. So I think those are probably the two there that are the most interest of this group. And over in the Senate, so I'll just mention Senate Bill 75 in passing. This was one of a few concealed weapons bills that we continue to see get filed. Obviously, we're keeping an eye on those for various reasons. This would lower the age to 18. Obviously, our high schools do have 18-year-olds in them, so something to keep an eye on. And then Senate Bill 181 is another one of our priority bills. This one came out of a conversation we had with a legislator in the interim. She was interested in kind of an anti-grooming bill. We've seen these get filed in other states. She ended up filing this version, which is more of a telecommunications spin on it, kind of focusing on kind of that space where some of that early grooming takes place, and trying to, again, kind of close loopholes that have allowed some bad actors. And I also just mentioned, as I try to do every time we talk about the misconduct bills, we stress with legislators and everybody else that this is really about a small minority of teachers. The vast majority of our teachers are excellent and really focused on the health and safety and education, obviously, of our children. But we are trying to close some loopholes that allow that very small number of bad actors to operate. So any questions about any of these? I don't want to take up too much of your time talking about bills that might not go anywhere. So likewise, I put some resolutions on here. Don't know that any of these will come to fruition, but again, highlighting these because I think they're topics that even if there's not a task force, we will probably talk about. during the interim. In particular, you'll see 147 there. There's been a lot of talk, again, because of the strange year we've had about non-traditional instruction NTI days and strengthening the requirements around those. Our office that houses NTI is already working on strengthening some of those regulations. But I think there's also an interest in this broader conversation about virtual programs, both full-time and part-time, and some of the regulations and rules surrounding those, and thinking about whether there should be some different rules that pertain to virtual programming and different types of programming. And then Senate Bill, or the Resolution 131 there. So last year we had the Efficient and Effective Task Force focused on essentially JCPS. This expands it quite a bit and gives it kind of more scope. So we'll see if they go that direction or not. And then a couple of resolutions focused on the Kentucky School for the Deaf in Danville. We also have a few pieces of legislation that were filed on that one. So that one may be a topic of conversation as well. And I think that's it. So that's the quick version of what's happened this legislative session. Still have a little bit of time to go before we get across the finish line and have a kind of a full picture of what all has been passed into law. We do put out guidance on all the bills that become law shortly after the session ends. And then for those that don't have an emergency clause or other effective date, the Attorney General will release an opinion probably in a few weeks on the effective date, but it's 90 days after the session. But his opinion kind of sets the date so everybody's on the same page. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them. If not, thank you. Let me know if
Brian,
you see me there.
Just briefly, Senate Bill 253 is something that we hope to pick up in the interim. That deals with our teacher pathway.
Oh yeah.
Could you mention that one, please, if you don't mind?
Yeah. Yep. So back in November, the KWIB redefined the top 5 demand sectors. And so that's important because that's what the Kentucky Work Ready Scholarship funds. So pathways that lead to a credential in one of the top 5 demand fields are covered by the Kentucky Work Ready Scholarship. That all kicked off a conversation about our education pathways and whether or not we could get those added to Work Ready, because the Work Ready is a phenomenal scholarship that pays for up to 60 credit hours, no strings attached. Right. So unlike our existing teacher scholarship, there's no repayment option. There's no conversion if you don't finish the program. It's just a true free scholarship. So I was really interested in looking at that. So we had a great conversation with Senator Higdon, as well as Kia, who administers the Work Ready program, as well as the other scholarship programs. In doing so, we settled on what became Senate Bill 253, which would be amazing if we could get it across the finish line. I don't think that's going to happen this session, unfortunately. But it sort of took a different direction and reimagined what our teacher scholarships could look like. And it would have combined the 2 existing teacher scholarships, because we have the teacher scholarship, which has been on the books for some number of years. But they also created what they called the student loan forgiveness program, teacher student loan forgiveness program, but it wasn't really loan forgiveness. It was just really the same scholarship again. So we were going to squish those to use that existing pot of money to do the teacher scholarship on the back end once you were admitted to an EPP, but then at the same time expand the number of dual credit courses that students in the teaching and learning pathways could get, so that in theory you could get an associate's degree while you were in high school, immediately go into an EPP program that was fully funded or fully paid for, and have a full pathway to a bachelor's degree in education that was covered by scholarships. So pretty exciting. It would have also incentivized districts to think about kind of grow your own programs. So Nelson County and some others are doing a kind of a great job with that right now. Some utilizing, like Nelson County utilizes an apprenticeship model, but what we had tentatively set up wouldn't have required districts to do an apprenticeship model, but could have done other grow your own type of programs. So I definitely think that conversation will continue. hopefully we can see something get refiled again next year and get some traction, especially during a budget session when we may be able to have a little more flexibility, since obviously it does pertain to a couple different pots of money. So that's the quick version of what's happening with teacher scholarships. It's an exciting conversation. Hopefully we can get something in place sometime soon that would give districts the option to create a fully paid pathway to a bachelor's degree in education. So, and the part of the problem with adding it to Work Ready, by the way, is that Work Ready is really focused on applied associate's degrees and less. The problem for us is in the education field is you can't get a certified position without a bachelor's degree, and we don't have sub-baccalaureate credentials in education like we see in a lot of the trade fields, and even in nursing. The RN degree is a 2-year degree, so just a different world, and that's kind of why we moved away from adding it to Work Ready, kind of keeping that more focused on the CTE world, and sort of imagining a new scholarship option for teachers. So stay tuned. Hopefully that conversation will continue and we'll get something done next session.
Thank you, Brian. I will point out, in case you didn't know this, but all the bills are linked, and Brian has saved us a ton of time in searching those down. And I know I printed off a couple to read and check through, so we appreciate that.
You're welcome. And if you think of anything, there's my email. Feel free to shoot me an email. Happy to talk about things going on in Frankfurt.
Thank you. We're going to move on with our agenda to the assessment section. And so I believe Jennifer Stafford is going to start us off with some exciting updates about the framework.
Thank you, Janabeth, and good morning, everyone. You are exactly right. We could not be more thrilled on where we are currently with the framework and this initiative with the Kentucky United We Learn. We've had a series of prototypes that we developed in conjunction with our members of our Kentucky United We Learn Council. We took prototypes across Kentucky with surveys. We've talked to small groups. We've talked to L3 district, local labs of learning, districts that are not local labs of learning. Outside of that, we've had a lot of conversation to get us to where we are. Those prototypes went through a series of those in 2024. We had 4 prototypes and led us to what we're calling frameworks. So in each time what we're doing is we're developing something for discussion. So we put it out and we get feedback, and then we come back through this iterative process and develop and hone in really on what the Commonwealth wants as the vision, not only for assessment and accountability systems, but also the future of education. So we've had a lot of engagement with this. We've got currently, we've had 2 prototypes, and you are the first group that gets to hear about and discuss the Framework 3.0 now. So we've had 2 previous frameworks, and we've had a series of town halls that were well attended. We had over 600 people that came to our town halls, and you can see here the distribution of the type of participant that we had. I'll note for you that we had a team go out to the town halls across KDE. The commissioner was there for each one of them. And at each one, we had a district that presented, and the district representatives had their own perspective and shared their journey about where they are in relation to developing their vibrant learning experiences, their own portraits of a learner, and their own local accountability system. So our district representatives were fantastic, sharing their journey and how to get to the place that they were. So we really appreciate our district representatives for being part of this, these town halls. The most common topics of the town halls were, of course, the assessments. There were a lot of discussions around the interim assessments, and we'll talk specifically about where those questions came up and how that it then influenced our 3.0 document. So I hope you have those. I hope you've gotten a chance to review those, because we're looking forward to your input today on that. The other topics, of course, were local accountability systems, because that's new. It's not something that is part of our previous systems. You know, we've had state systems and we have federal systems, but we're looking toward creating systems that collaborate with their local communities and collaborate across the Commonwealth. So a big topic was local accountability systems and developing vibrant learning experiences for the students in there. And of course, then how the science, social studies, writing, particularly student growth, all were included in the town halls. We had particular interest in how our students with special needs would be included in these types of experiences. And so we had, again, great engagement, great feedback. The participants that were there were very attentive and asked questions. And so we could not be more pleased with how the town halls went. So with all of that feedback, then we get, because all of the town halls were explaining and providing the opportunity, that platform for our participants to give feedback on 2.0. So the difference between 2.0 and 3.0 was based on that feedback that we got from our town halls. We've talked to our local superintendent advisory council. We've talked to also the Kentucky Board of Education about where we should be with the systems. So the difference between 2.0 and 3.0 particularly are that districts now have the option to administer their state developed or independently purchased reading and math interim assessments. And I'll say by far, this was the topic that we got the most feedback on throughout the past couple of months. Along with the town halls, what we did is talk to Education Co-op's board of directors, and those are the superintendents within that co-op. And also, they were able to provide input directly. And so we heard very clearly that the interim assessments and the interim assessments that they are providing at their district, they may want to continue with them. So in the survey that we had shared last summer, it was a particular question of the survey that asked about the preference of giving up or going to a state-developed interim assessment system, or staying with their own local interim assessment system. And so 67% of responders of that survey last summer said that they would be willing to give their own locally purchased interim assessment system in reading and math up in lieu of a state developed. Well, when we got to the co-op directors and the town halls, we found that was not an overwhelmingly supported idea. So there is a lot of work that has been done in the districts to align their processes with their own data from those interim assessments. their PLCs, their student plans. So we quickly heard that giving up their own local interim assessments was not as popular as we had from that survey. So for the first time, you may hear me say that there's an option that our districts can opt into something. Now, that's not something that we've had here in Kentucky, but in the case of this reading and math interim assessment system, it will offer a state-developed system to districts in lieu of their own interim assessment system that they are purchasing. Now, the state-developed system will be aligned to the Kentucky academic standards, and our idea is that the interim assessments will be developed by the same vendor that then creates our summative assessments, so that it is a seamless system, that it looks and feels much like the summative assessments in the fact that it's the same similar type of questions, it's the same platform that the students engage in, and so forth. So that's a big difference between Framework 2.0 and 3.0. The next is we clarified in 3.0 that science off-grade testing for grades 3, 4, 6, 7, and 9 is, again, an optional assessment that districts can choose to opt into the state-developed test or create their own local, authentic, maybe competency-based off-grade science assessments in those grades. Now, there is a requirement for science to be tested once per grade band. The current Every Student Succeeds Act, that's our federal law that's currently in place, mandates that states test and report science once per grade band. However, it does not have to be in accountability. It just has to be tested and reported. So that once per grade band at 5, 8, and 10 would be mandatory to be tested, but this off grade could be optional for our districts to opt into our state assessment. We also had you heard earlier from Dr. Fraley about the K2 assessments, particularly in mathematics. We also had the suggestion from our superintendents that since they have to do those already, those screeners, that the state should develop those K through 2 assessments that schools could opt into, so that, again, it would be aligned to the Kentucky academic standards and be grade appropriate for our students in K2. So that's been added to Framework 3.0 that was not previously part of that Framework 2.0. So, but again, this is optional. The districts could continue to purchase their own state developed or take the state developed optional K2 assessments. The other piece of Framework 3.0 is about the graphic. The graphic, we had 3 pieces in the 2.0, but we're talking really about 2 different systems, one federal system and one local system. So we updated the graphic that hopefully you've gotten to see, or we'll get to see here in just a moment with Framework 3.0. I do want to note also that there's a technical document in support of the framework, because all the technical pieces that educators may want to dig into can't fit on the framework, but we want to provide more details around each of the different components. So the technical document has been updated to align with the changes I just mentioned. Also, in there is a reference in the technical document, although that's not in the framework, there is a reference for an exception for English learners, which we've been in discussion with particular legislators have expressed a desire to change the exception that we're currently using. Right now, with our English learners, there is an exception that the students do not take the assessment their first year upon arrival. So they can, there is an exception that students don't take their the assessment the first year that they are in a Kentucky public school. So then they go fully in their second year. Well, there's an exception that we've been working with legislators on that's different than what we're currently doing, that would allow the students to test their first year, but and set the baseline for future years, so that that second year that they're here, they would test again and be included in individual student growth. And then the third year that the student is in the school, then they would test and be included both in growth and in the achievement proficiency or the status score within that. So there's exceptions for the English learners that we are also considering that is highlighted in that technical document. And then there, to the technical document, there are other areas that have been revised just for readability and clarity of readability. So let's look at the framework. The framework, this first part hasn't changed. There were no revisions to this. The goal is still to enhance the educational offerings that the students are receiving, to expand vibrant learning experiences, that students have the ability to demonstrate their knowledge in various ways. They have agency over what they have or produce and able to engage in, all aligned to the Kentucky Academic Standards. So that's an important foundational document, and those standards, those content standards are vitally important, that these vibrant learning experiences are aligned to those. Then collaboration is another key principle that is in the framework, that districts and communities work together to enhance the student outcomes. So with this, we're looking at districts collaborating with their local community, whether it's business leaders, faith leaders, parents, students, educators, coming together to prioritize what's important for that local community and the outcomes for their students. So we're looking for this collaboration where our district leaders and our community leaders come together to support our educators and our students. Looking at building networks where districts come together and be critical friends, or help each other overcome obstacles. One district may be facing a situation that another district of similar size or demographics have already faced and found ways to overcome those challenges. So looking at developing a collaboration and getting away from the comparison from district to districts. Developing those peer networks and bringing together districts to do that. Moving away from those color ratings and eliminating those color ratings. Looking for innovation, and especially during with assessments, And I think you've heard some of those that we're talking about more optional state testing, districts developing their own authentic learning demonstrations with where they engage with their communities around designing local accountability systems that reflect those local values. And then again, getting that support and feedback from the within districts, across districts, and then also looking at an external evaluator that would come in for support in adding to that network of collaboration so that they can identify exemplars and connect districts to each other. So looking not to evaluate, but more about that connection and feedback for support. And then again, giving that local districts and those districts the ability to work together to be critical friends. Now, this is the part of the framework that has the changes to it. You can see the graphic clearly shows that there is a federal accountability system and a local accountability system. One that has on the right-hand side, the federal accountability system has reading and math at the forefront. The performance on summative assessments in reading and math, looking at individual student growth. This has been in all of our frameworks, and we heard very clearly from the beginning that the Commonwealth wants to get away from that current change component that we have in our current system to an individual student growth. And that individual student growth is looking at reading and math and being from 1 year to the next. So looking at individual student growth from, for example, grade 3 reading in that summative assessment to grade 4 reading in that summative assessment and in the 4th grade. So looking at where you get the student and then where the student is then the next year. So that indicator is for elementary and middle schools only. So that individual student growth would be grades 4 through 8, because we, as in Kentucky, do not test every year at high school. The other indicators then of the accountability would remain the same. The transition readiness at high school would continue to have both the college and the career part of that, where students can demonstrate they're ready to move on. Graduation rate would continue to be both the 4-year and that persistence towards graduation in the 5th-year rate combined. Looking at English language progress and how our students that are learning English are attaining their English language and moving toward proficiency. And then including student voice in that federal accountability system to continue with that climate and safety survey that we are currently administering. Now, that last bullet on that federal side indicates where the science assessments are mandatory, that the state provide a assessment that is common, that is administered to all of the students and per grade band and reported. Now, again, that piece is about the assessment. That last bullet, the science assessment, would not be part of the calculation for that federal accountability. Now, looking at the left side, the local accountability system, that would be your collaboration with your community, where the district leaders and community leaders would come together, prioritizing where they want their students to have the focus. So looking at flexibility in administration and inclusion, particularly those locally determined indicators. So we heard many examples during our town halls from our districts that they are already doing and including in their local accountability system. Just a couple of examples that we've heard is that one district is looking at an indicator within their local accountability of being the participation of their student body in either extracurricular or co-curricular activities. Because, research shows that anytime students are involved in school activities, then they tend to do well in school or do better in school. So looking at, one district is looking at the percentage of students that are involved in varying activities, whether it be dance or music activities, maybe a sports club or an academic team, things of that nature. We also heard another district is looking at the fact that they have said the supports for social emotional health is important to them. So they're looking at the amount of supports that they're giving their students in that regard, and including that as part of their local accountability system. So with this local accountability system, there's many different ways that districts can prioritize and have that ability to be flexible and customize what they think that is important to that local community, because it's not the same for another community, because all communities are different and they have different priorities. So their accountability then can be different, which is vastly different from where we've been in Kentucky and where we are over here with the federal accountability system, because that federal accountability system is going to identify our schools for our federal classifications of comprehensive support and improvement, targeted support and improvement, and additional targeted support and improvement. So that system has to be the same. So because we're making comparisons and we're making identification. Whereas the local accountability system, where it's dependent on that local priority, it does not have to be the same. So there's abilities to customize and tell their own story and all of the good things that are happening within their schools. So then other pieces of that local accountability system, again, we've talked about the interim assessments. The option there would be that the schools or districts could either purchase their own or opt into the state one. And then the last there is the flexibility in the off-grade testing that I just mentioned. So that 3, 4, 6, 5, 6, and 9, that off-grade testing. So they can either opt into the state or they can purchase or develop their own, excuse me. Then the required options for our local accountability systems are the vibrant learning experiences. And again, the main goal is to, one of the main goals is to impact the experiences that the students have toward those vibrant learning experiences. And so how the schools or districts provide those vibrant learning experiences is up to them. The Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee of the Kentucky United We Learn has a list, but those are, it's not an extensive list or an exhaustive list, but districts can come up with their own ideas around how they're expanding those vibrant learning experiences. Also, writing and social studies, those are going to be required in the local accountability system, but there's going to be some options there. Again, the option will be to administer the state developed assessments in social studies and writing, or the district could develop their own more competency-based, authentic demonstrations of learning in writing and social studies. The required would be that they are included in the local accountability system. So again, all of this would be in support of the portrait of a learner. And we heard the conversation earlier about with Dr. Fraley about the importance of the portrait of a learner, developing students who are critical thinkers, that they can think deeply. We are preparing our students for a world that's unknown. We have no idea what the world will look like in, in 10 years or 50 years. But our students are going to be active citizens, and we want them to be engaged citizens in their lives. And so we want to give them experiences that they are able to apply knowledge, they can critically think, they can become effective communicators and empowered learners that they will continue to learn throughout their lives. We want them to be able to collaborate with each other. So providing those opportunities are essential for our students and preparing them for an unknown future. And supporting that local portrait of a learner will help prepare our students. The last piece you've seen and heard before, because this one hasn't changed. Our districts, some of our districts are out there leading this work. Some of our local labs of learning are leading this work, but we also have districts who are not an L3 district who are out leading this. But there's other districts who have not engaged in this type of development of systems. And so we need to meet them where they are. So there's going to be a phased in, or the thought is to phase it in so that we meet the districts and support them in expanding these vibrant learning experiences, developing those authentic demonstrations of learning, and developing their own local accountability system. So there's going to be an on-ramp and a long on-ramp to get there. Now, all of this is in preparation for legislation for consideration, literally next legislative session. You heard Brian give an update about this short session, this 25 session. So we're going to move into an advocacy phase. We've already engaged many legislators, both in conversation, including them engaging with conversations both individually as well as in the Kentucky United We Learn Council meetings. And we had legislators attend some of our town halls where we were very pleased that they were able to attend. And so we're moving into that advocacy phase. We're going to talk this week. We're going to take Framework 3.0 to the Kentucky United We Learn Council. Next week, on the 25th, we're going to speak with the local superintendent advisory council. Again, gathering their feedback and in preparation for the Kentucky Board of Education meeting next week. They meet Wednesday and Thursday of next week. So lots of discussions continue as we move forward with a reimagined system. So let me pause there and invite you now for any feedback. We wonder what you liked, what you were wowed with, what you're still wondering about, because we want your feedback so that we can take your feedback to these discussions as we move forward to the United We Learn Council, LSAC, and the board. So wows and
Jennifer,
wonders. Yes.
I'll get you started. I have a request and then I have a question. So I'll start with the request. Years ago, I've been through multiple accountability systems, and the question has always come up, why do we take a year off of reading a math instruction at the most critical juncture I see, which is the transition from middle school to high school? I think with the new framework, we have an opportunity to correct that. That should have been corrected a long time ago. Accountability at the high school is only relying, really, the federal accountability on one class of students, the 10th graders. And it seems like with the emphasis on student growth, individual student growth included in the federal accountability, why would we not give a reading and math test to 9th grade students? I understand that the standards for 9th and 10th grade English are the same, but it seems like with the Kentucky numeracy work and the reading work, everything that we're doing and all the money that the state legislature is putting towards improving reading and math, we just take a year off and we hope it's stuck. And I really think this is our one opportunity to say, you know what, we're going to assess 9th and 10th graders, and we're going to be able to follow students' growth from 4th grade to 10th grade. And so I would want you to consider that and talk about that, because, you know, like most 9th graders are taking algebra. We just saw a presentation where we're talking about how to really focus in on making students prepared for that. But yeah, we take a year out of accountability. And I know as a high school, it would be great to not have just one class of students taking the state accountability, the federal accountability, but to have two. And so that's my request. And you can just take that and put it with the request when you consider the framework. But here's my big question. I still am going back to the fact that we talked about how the world is unknown. We don't know what will be happening. And yet science is only reported. It is not even a required local measure like writing and social studies. And so we've literally taken what every expert and every presentation I've heard from UK Next Gen always starts with, we don't even know the jobs of the future, and they put them up, and all of those jobs that they're seeing are in the domain of science. And so I understand that science is required to be assessed, but I don't understand why we would be so afraid of including it as a measure. And the fact that it's not even a requirement, but yet we're going to require social studies and writing, doesn't make sense with the combination of the vibrant learning experiences.
Sure. And from the onset with the discussion with the Kentucky United We Learn Council, is one of the focus has been that we streamline down to the federal requirements. And I think that's where the direction has been, is to reduce and eliminate and cut back where we can. And so with ESSA, as it currently stands, science does not have to be part of accountability, but it does have to be tested, as we've mentioned. And I think that was a premise of and a goal of the council as well as the board. Commissioner Fletcher, would you like to respond?
Yeah, one of the things too, that is not only has to be assessed, it has to be reported. So science is going to be reported by itself as its own category. Now, I will say in Model Framework 1.0, science was a part of the federal accountability. And after taking it to various groups, they asked that we put in the survey in there instead. So 1.0 actually had science as a part of the federal accountability piece. And after going through 3-4 different groups, it was asked that we move it back out. Now, I guess, and again, I would love to see science as a part of the accountability. I'll be the first to admit that. But I do see some of the value that was talked about to have, if you're going to streamline that federal piece down to as low as you can, it just to minimize that federal accountability piece, then one of the big asks was we have student voice, and that's why the survey was put in there. So with that being said, I think that by pulling it out and reporting it separately, we can actually put a larger focus on science by itself, since it has to be, again, some people argue, well, it's not part of accountability. I think if you report it separately and by it on its own, it could be a larger part of a perception of accountability as we move forward. So again, after going through our Cool Council, LSAC, also our Kentucky Board of Education, we did move that science out in version 2.0, I think it was.
And I understand that there was a request to reduce the federal accountability, and really we're just tied it down to reading and math with a few other measures. But what surprised me was that we are requiring local districts to add writing and social studies, but we're not asking them to include science as a local accountability. So I'm not asking for it to come back into the federal, but it just seems like if you're a science teacher out there, KDE has just said, you know, it's not as important. And so
please don't say it's KDE. Okay,
I know.
Please don't say it's
Sorry.
just KDE. There's a large group that went into this.
I will correct that, but at some point the local teacher, and you know, I don't understand why science isn't a required local element when you've asked for writing and social studies to be required local elements. It would be easy. If a district didn't want to do anything else, they can use the science results that are reported from KDE. So it's not going to be an additional test that would need to be coming up. I do know many superintendents started talking about other measures that would show science, and so you would have that option. But I can't understand why we would leave out such an essential core subject from at the minimum being part of local accountability. And I think that's something that, you know, there was a relief to not have it be a part of federal, but yet why drop it from local? So I'm going to not take any more advantage as being chair and open it up for other people to have comments or questions.
Let me respond to that, Jan Beth, if you don't mind. Point well taken, and we will take it to our Cool Council and our board, because that's one of the reasons why we're here. Why we're here is we want to hear that. So again, as you can see, we've been listening all along and making changes. So this is a point that we will take to the Cool Council and also to our board and LSAC as we move forward. So thank you for that.
Anyone else? Alan.
Yeah, so I have a little different question, and I don't know if it's it's appreciative of where we are, but it's a wonder, I think, of what I still see as an awfully subject-centered conception of how we're measuring learning versus a learner-centered conception or a competency-centered conception. And I'll say it in this way, in that it appears, and we've done this, that I can't remember a time probably since the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s of the 1900s, that we haven't thought of the transmission of content or subject knowledge and basic skills in reading and math as the primary way that we look forward to schools. And yet the tension I have is with the where we really are right now and the not knowing about the next 60 years in front of us. And it seems to me that we've also been pushing this notion that learners have to have these kinds of core competencies that if they're going to navigate an unknown future, it won't be sufficient to just know science content or social studies content. I'm a social studies teacher, or math and reading, but rather all these other things too. So the reason I bring it up this way is the practicality then of not having much about the portrait of a learner other than saying this all supports the portrait of a learner, and the push for even more locally, more requirements on local assessments versus the not, but that are only around subject-centered things, pushes out all the space and time practically for student voice, choice, and the development of competency-based ways for districts to show, because there simply there's not enough time in the day. If we just say in order for something to count, it has to be counted in the either federal system or even required in the local system. So I'm wondering if there's not another way to have a little bit more of a forward looking in our moonshot idea about the learner as a whole and competency-based things that's represented by our portrait of a learner to be shown throughout. Maybe not as you will all do this portrait of a learner thing, but how will your portrait of a learner be captured at the local level? So that can count too, and not just subject-centered things. So I know that vibrant learning experiences are down there, and one way we can show it, I get that, and that's good. But I think we're going to end up defaulting, especially in the districts that face the biggest challenges, that we will simply only be able to show what minimal math, reading, tests, and growth all the way through high school, even though that high school experience especially should be an eye-opening, world-giving experience in all subject areas that are not just reading and math, and certainly not even just science and social studies, but somewhere about how they're developing as that person, their critical thinking, their abilities to collaborate, their effective communication, and those things too. And I think if we don't have it on our document somewhere, practically speaking, most districts will have it somewhere, but most people won't think it really counts or really matters. And I think it's a powerful opportunity with our student voice team and others that what they've been telling us is they want more engaging, empowering schools that develop them as people for their future. And we have to have a way of trying to say that counts, not just numeracy counts, not just reading counts, but me, the learner, counts, and developing all these competencies. And we have, I think, 140 plus counties now that have a portrait of a learner. I would love to see us lean into a little bit about how that could be more spelled out as part of the local and state accountability in terms of at least expectations that we have these parts there, so that we're not just doing subject-centered tests all the time of the 20th century.
So Alan, let me jump in because I had the opportunity to look closely at the technical document, and I completely echo what you're saying. I think when we get into a close read of the technical document, writing, social studies are all supposed to be competency-based if a district makes that decision. I think Jennifer talked about this pilot phase. You are correct. If we don't put models out there of how these will be more focused on the student, we will result in the same. But I can tell you as a district who is in the process of just transitioning, and we are getting ready to launch our portrait of a learner, that we are looking at ways where we see combinations of these come together under our portrait of a learner. So my call to the group, the Cool Council, is we need to really examine what's going on in this pilot phase so that we put out models of a collaborative design of accountability. For example, I'll give you one right now. It's not in an accountability grade, but I was just in a classroom where second grade students were preparing for an oral report to their fifth grade buddies on a subject they had been working on in reading class. And that was a great way they were demonstrating that they were communicators, and it was showing their ability to write and speak, but it was about a topic that they had selected as second graders. And so I think we are going to be able to get there, but that pilot phase is going to be critical because we need some of those traditional districts that have been high achieving in academics to say, what would this look like if it was different, and how would you merge those together?
If I may chime in there, first of all, Mr. Young, I think you're spot on in a lot of things that you're saying, because if you went to any of the town halls, the star of the show, of each show, was the school district that was presenting about their vibrant learning, about their portraits of learner. And if you look at just this one pager, the most important part to me on this is not the federal accountability piece. It's not the interim assessments, although those are important. It's that locally determined indicators and also that vibrant learning experiences. Those are the two main parts to me that I really focus in on. But looking at what we have as requirements, I think in a nutshell, how can we on this one pager show or this 3-pager to show the major focus in what we would like to do with local accountability, especially as it relates to building collaborators, building other things. And I think that's what the first page tries to do. So if you go back to the first page, we're trying to move from standardization to more vibrant learning, comparison to collaboration, and state to local innovation. But now the other thing too, as part of the process moving forward, is we've met with one district that's talking about rubrics for what and also too, we've also started developing this also at the KDE of what a system, a local accountability system could look like. But we're trying to do that in a way that we don't say, this is what you need to have, because it needs to be local. It needs to be personalized. But this is the process. How much collaboration? Are you collaboration with your communities? Are you looking at how it relates back to your portrait of learner? So how do you get to that balance of, we want to give rubrics out there to steer and help people come to a good, solid, authentic local accountability model, without saying this is what you have to have in your local accountability model. So how much flexibility can we have? So I think we're going to have to balance with Janet Beth and what you said of how can we move forward with rubrics and help steer people and connect people and have people work together, but really show that emphasis on the portrait of the learner and what those competencies are we want for kids. So I think that, as you read through this, and honestly, most of our questions don't really come about local accountability. It always comes back to what are the interim assessments? What are these things like that? So it's like, how do we go back and focus on that flexibility, not only flexibility, but also too, that authentic learning that really captures student learning itself. And how do we grow those collaborators, those communicators, those grow grit, persistence, those things we want to see with kids. So I can see your point on this, and how can we better capture that part? Jennifer, anything you want to add to that?
You went directly where I was going to go, because, there's limitations on what you can write in 3 pages, right? And we wanted to make sure that, the portrait of a learner. So when we present, there's always an emphasis toward that, the portrait of a learner, as well as our Kentucky academic standards. But a picture is worth 1,000 words. And when you see these districts and their discussions, that the vibrant learning experiences and that student-centered is there. Commissioner mentioned the rubrics. I think that's going to be a place that you can provide clear expectations or ability for students, for teachers, for educators to more clearly understand if they have not seen these type of systems in place. So I think it's educating, it's expanding, it's growing us as an education community on what this is, these local accountability systems are, and what they could be, because they're very powerful. They're very powerful. And we've had one superintendent said, this is not mandatory, but I would not go back from it. We've gone down this road, and we've seen how far it can take us. And when we have communities come together, in support of their local districts, it's everybody wins. The students win, the educators win, the schools win, and the community, they win. So,
And to add to that, one of the other things as part of this, having districts work together, we've talked about, and actually it's a part of this model, is to have that external evaluator come in to list, these are exemplary practices. If you want to look at, if you're a district that you're trying to grow as how you do a portrait of a learner, these are the districts that you want to observe. Or if you want to see exemplary practices on how collaboration is occurring, this is what it would look like. These are what defenses of learning look like in this district. These are some of the exemplars that you want to go to build that network. So we're not saying that yours need to look exactly like this, but this gives you, kind of help you shape your vision, how you move forward.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. And I had read the technical document, and I know there is more there. And I know there's also more around the movements that have been going on. I appreciate that. I am mostly talking about the 3-pager and being just a little bit more intentional about how to integrate the profile of a learner concept, not just the vibrant learning experiences, as one of the things that we'll be looking for in assessment and accountability. And I just think by putting it on the bottom, I think that's fine to say that, but the parents mostly don't know what portrait of a learner means. You know what I'm saying? So it could be even something about, saying what the state's portrait of a learner is, but also then, acknowledging we have local versions of these, but they're all very, very similar, right? But the notion of making sure in our assessments that we are encouraging the integration of competencies, not just standards, into our ways students will demonstrate their learning and growth, I think is important on our forward, outward-facing documents to the public. And I'm just simply saying, I don't get the sense of it really here, but most people will come with the lenses they already come with, and they'll see what they're looking for: reading, math, science, this, and things like that. So if there's a way of trying to capture that a little bit more, I think it would be a fairer expression of really where we are in Kentucky and how we're trying to lead if we were able to do that on that particular document. One last little technical thing also I wonder about, because there is a time and space challenge when we put so much emphasis still on reading and math and even some science, as to what happens to everything else, not just subject matter wise, but these other kinds of ways of designing interim assessments. And it looks as if in reading and math, I'm not for sure why we don't encourage competency-based, integrative of the learner kinds of interim assessments as an option for reading and math, and we only say that's possible for like science and social studies. Is there a reason why, if a district wanted to explore different things it could use interim wise for reading and math than just the more canned of the same as the state assessment? Is there a reason that that's not a possibility?
So I think that, with the input that we get on the interim assessments were more about providing some diagnostic instructional, particular instructional information aligned to the standards. So where we've gone with this is the discussion has been that the interim assessment system it becomes adaptive. And with that adaptive nature, that you develop assessment systems that provide more diagnostic information that could be gathered very quickly in real time, so that the teacher, student, parent would know where the student is, particularly in that moment, so that it can impact instruction literally the next day. So that's been the goal of developing this interim assessment system toward meeting the information in support of that MTSS system that Mickey Marinelli spoke about earlier. So providing that instructional information. Now, I realize you can get instructional information from, a competency-based system or a more authentic, but I think the goal was to have it very quickly, a quick turnaround of assessments aligned to that Kentucky academic standards.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer because that makes sense in terms of how the framing on interim assessments is in that way. I do think there's a tension, though, still from the learner's perspective. The more and more we fill ourselves up with those kinds of diagnostic interim assessments, the less and less ability for space for learning on authentic things may occur. So that's where I'm not so supportive of adding science necessarily automatically back in, because if I'm not that I'm anti-science, I think every test we add back in, if it's only in a standardized, subject-centered way, it takes time and space away from the learner-centered competency-based things we're also trying to grow. And we can't get the perfect system, I get that. But I'm just simply saying, the more we have places that are having their time spent on more and more and more assessments, especially if they're not authentic, then the less opportunity there is to integrate and have authentic learning and demonstrating, whether it's interim or summative or whatever going. So that part I appreciate, but I appreciate the immediacy of the diagnostic pieces that may be part of some of the assessments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I have one additional question. So I know you've mentioned the external feedback to inform like kind of best practices with the local measures. I was a little surprised to not see anything in the technical document about consistency of those local measures and how often school systems would be able to change those. It doesn't do us any good if I can change my local measures every year and then I don't ever measure anything. And so I was curious for the group, and they maybe have just not gotten to this, but I live in the world of district assessment coordinator. And so I'm curious about how long will local measures stay in place? Like if we decide to measure one thing and we don't like it, can we switch next year? And so I think that would be a challenge, and it's something for the Cool Council, if they haven't already, to start addressing and figuring out to how will we bring consistency to those local measures. Is it that every 3 years you can examine your local measures? I don't know. So that was just a concern I saw, because a system with changing measures doesn't really measure anything if I can change my mind if I don't like that measure. So I don't know if you've all talked about that. It might be too much in the weeds.
Well, it's a local district decision. So when it comes to local accountability, if the priorities, and it's the priorities of that local district to develop their indicators and what they want to be included within their local accountability system. So if they find that their priorities change, then that would be a decision of the local community in the development of and discussion of their local accountability system.
I think you're setting yourself up to see an ever-changing list of local accountability measures, and in the end, not really committing to measuring something for 2 to 3 years. And so I think that is an important consideration point. I get that the local has control, but at the end of the day, if we don't like this measure, we throw it out and we find another one, doesn't seem like a good accountability system. It may be a system that reports what we find important, but calling it accountability if it doesn't have to stick for more than 1 year seems like a way for schools to just keep changing. In the world of DACs, we talk about keep changing the ball game and, you know, changing the sport we're playing and changing the rules. So if I'm a family and I'm looking at 2 different districts, and if I look in the 24, say I look in the 27 year, and then they have different measures in the 28 year, what am I to think are important? So
I'll add to that. Some of the rubrics we've been looking at is how does a district show growth? So in order to show growth, you're going to have some consistency. Now, have we specifically said that a district can yes or no, they can change something from, we've let that up to locally, but one of the priorities there is how do you show growth over time in your priorities? So it would make sense that you would have at least 3 years of data for a specific topic, but it's not something that we've added in, but we'll bring it up in some discussions as we move forward.
And I guess my last thing, and I keep coming back to this, I'm a Kentucky graduate in 1990, and that was the historic Roe versus the Council for Better Education, which really dramatically changed how my career has gone in Kentucky, because, you know, it was all about funding, and I get that, but beyond the funding, it was also about creating adequate and equitable education for all students. And you asked, one of the last questions you asked, Jennifer, was about, did we reach the moonshot? Well, I can't help, I wouldn't feel good if I didn't say, I think we're reaching the moonshot, but we're reaching over 100 different moons with local accountability. And so I worry as we transition, you know, are we on Saturn with 247 moons? Not quite there, and we're not quite Jupiter with their 95, but we're somewhere in between with the number of districts in the Commonwealth. I just keep asking myself, how will this accountability system with a heavy emphasis on local measures not lead us back almost 40 years to inequitable education or inadequate education for students in the Commonwealth? And I just think as you further discuss this, and KDE's commitment to build this system, which is in the technical document, we need to have some measure or some piece that really ensures that we don't go backwards in time with inadequacy and inequitable education. That's my fear. Nobody has a crystal ball, but, you know, I just feel like we've got way too many moonshots going out there.
I think that's one of the, when you go back to the original moonshot, when it talks about having something that is, you know, if we could put that back up where we talk about that is relevant to all learners, that is meaningful to all learners, useful to all learners. The only way that you're going to come up with an accountability system is have a measure of local accountability that is, because we're so different across the Commonwealth. So there is one consistency in there, that's the federal accountability piece. But I think as we've gone through, and this idea has grown throughout, as a matter of fact, it probably started back in July of last year, how local accountability becomes a larger piece of this, because I think in order to have a meaningful and useful accountability system, there has to be a large measure of local accountability there. Now, I will say this, the other things that, to your point, Janet Beth, is how do we make sure that we're meeting the needs of all students? How do we make sure that every student has access? How do we make sure that every student has opportunity? And one of the things that we've talked about in our document, I believe it's in the document, we've definitely had meetings, is how are you able to disaggregate the data? How do you look at, make sure you're getting all student populations? So those are some things that we'll have to have discussions on as moving forward. But you're right. Again, I guess at the end of the day, we're looking at 171 different moons.
Alan?
Yeah, so I appreciate Janet Beth bringing up the care reforms and the Rose decision and all that, because that also prompted me to think about the things where I think we are heading more towards a good moonshot, which is that the Kentucky goals for education, which are still out there, were significantly how we looked at those, which changed, I think, in the No Child Left Behind era to only focus on a couple of those goals. But I see our learner-centered, our Portrait of a Learner movement is going back and absolutely trying to say, we're supposed to be educating kids to all these kinds of qualities, capacities, disposition, knowledges, and so forth. So I really appreciate that moonshot forward in those regards. And I'm hopeful that we could also tie this, as I think our new current student voice team with their new concerns, which are not just about funding and adequacy, but about the direction of education. And so that students are find a more meaningful, engaging experience, that we highlight how assessment and accountability is important, but it shouldn't take us away from our goals for school and our goals for kids and our Portrait of a Learner. And that's where I'm hopeful. So I'm appreciative of the work that has been done about making that it is meaningful and useful to learners on this screen right here. And I think there is a thread, like a through line or a thread that's been since the 1990 on about the goals that we have for kids in our Kentucky schools. And I really think that that is one that we are trying to do. And I don't think that we need uniformity at all 171 counties, but we can get unity if we are doing certain standards and competencies across all of our state. And that's where I highlight that Portrait of a Learner stuff as well. There is a unity in this movement, even though we might have some flexibility on how all 171 counties show it. There is a way that we're moving forward with unity, and realizing it would be a problem if we were so inflexible that we just had to copy that, county by county. Thank you.
Janet Beth, I have to apologize. I have an 11:30 meeting I have to hop off for. So thank you to everyone. Jennifer will take all the other comments as we move forward. Great input. Thank you so much for that. And again, we love going into meetings like this because it actually challenges us to look at things in a different way. So, whether we agree or disagree, that's why we go to so many different groups to say, how do we get your input? How do we make sure that we're listening? Now, but the balance there is, just like Janet Beth pointed out, it's very difficult to get a perfect system. That's why local accountability is so important to me, is because I can't do one perfect system for every single district across the Commonwealth. KDE can't do one perfect system. As a matter of fact, the Cool Council can't do one perfect system. So to me, that's why the local accountability piece is so important in this, because I believe that local districts can do a better job of coming up with a better accountability system for their local district. Now, with guardrails, with some, these are the models that we're pointing towards. This is where we're trying to move. But again, trying to work together. And there has been such a strong movement of networking and working together. I said some of my favorite slides as we've moved forward has been in these town hall meetings, has been districts showing how they're working together. I'll go back to Clark County, and Woodford County had a slide up that had Clark County, Woodford County, Rowan County, Johnson County, Logan County, and several others that they were getting input from as they worked together to develop. And if you put pins on a map, that's all across our Commonwealth. So it's great to see districts working together towards a common goal, even though it may not be the common system for each one. So again, I appreciate it. And again, Dr. Stafford will take care of the rest. And I sincerely apologize, but thank y'all so much for the input. And it's good seeing you again.
Thank you for joining. Okay, any more questions about this? Okay, I think we're going to move on to our last topic, which is just some updates about our current accountability system. This council's got their feet in both sides. And so as you have more thoughts on the framework, don't hesitate to reach out to Jennifer. You can always reach Melissa. You might have her message and she can get something to Jennifer. But now we're going to learn a little bit about some current accountability system things. And so Jennifer.
Thank you, Janet Beth, and you're right. As we're looking toward the future, that's all about, what can be and what could be. And it's very exciting. We also have our current accountability system and our testing system. Rhonda Sims, our Associate Commissioner, is currently with a group of educators right now reviewing blueprints for the reading and writing assessment. So she apologizes she can't be here, but she's doing important work toward developing our systems. I just want to give you just a very brief update about where we are with our current systems here for the 24-25 school year. We started out in January with access testing. It started January 6th was our first date for access testing. And access testing is our assessment that we utilize for our English learners to demonstrate their proficiency level and their progress toward attaining the English language. So access testing started in January. And if you recall, that was the week that we had snow across Kentucky, and it just absolutely shut us down as a Commonwealth. So testing was delayed. Our district assessment coordinators, our building assessment coordinators, they were so dedicated, and they were so worked so hard to get access testing in the midst of snow and rain and floods and other emergencies. I just can't thank them enough for their dedication to our students in Kentucky. So our access testing ended right around Valentine's Day, February 14th, and worked with districts who had been impacted by those emergencies to complete testing. Right now, we are in the middle of ACT testing. It started last Tuesday, a week ago today. We have 2 windows that students can take the ACT. These windows this spring are for our students in grade 11. So it's their opportunity to take a state administered administration of the ACT. So the last count, over 41,000 students had taken the assessment since last Tuesday. And I'm sure that number has gone up today. So we're well underway with the state administration ACT. I will note for you here that the college readiness exam RFP is out. An RFP is a response for proposals for that college admissions exam. So we have gone through that process, or are going through the process. We've got a team that is currently moving through that procurement process for a college readiness exam. Also, testing is students that participate in the alternate Kentucky summative assessment. These are for our students that have the lowest cognitive abilities. Our alternate Kentucky summative assessment is in the makeup window. We have 2 windows. We have one in the fall and then one in the spring. For those students that in the fall that did not get to take the alternate Kentucky summative assessment, we have a makeup window currently happening. And then if they don't get to make up during the makeup window, then they can also make up window 1 during window 2 and also take window 2. So we're in the middle of that. Our K-screen, which is our kindergarten screener, we're currently in the middle of our ordering window. So the K-screen is administered at the beginning of the school year, just slightly before and a few weeks after the opening of school. So to get materials into the schools in time for that administration during the summer and early opening of the new school year, we order now in preparation for that. And there'll be some professional development and workshops for preparing our administrators to give that a screener. And then our Kentucky Summative Assessment is given, of course, the last 14 days school year. You heard that there is legislation that can, in the governor's discretion of, and gone to his desk about possibly changing the school calendars. So we have the possibility that the last 14 days could change for each of our districts. So we're working with districts now on collecting their current test windows. And if need be, we'll continue to work with those school districts on that. Now, we have a lot of opportunities for participation in our educators. And I want to talk just a little bit about these opportunities that they have on working toward and involvement in this committee work, because we're looking for educators right now who would be willing to participate in these activities. We're going to have a science refresh that's going to need range finding, PLDs, and also standard setting. So anytime we have new assessments, there are multiple steps that need to happen. So we bring in and invite Kentucky educators to assist with many of these topics related to assessments. And we are refreshing the science assessment currently. There's going to be new types of items, more standalone items in the Kentucky Summative Assessment for Science. With that, we're going to have range finding. And basically, range finding is a process of defining the range of performance of the students' responses that fall within each score point. So we invite Kentucky educators to be part of that and to help define what it means at every score point. So during these meetings, Kentucky educators, we need their input and their expertise in science. It's a method that we use to determine those responses and where how the student responds and what number of, if you will, points that they would get, particularly associated with constructed response items. So that is going to happen. After testing or shortly at the end of testing. And then once we have that, we'll move into performance level descriptors. Those PLDs are statements that describe like the specific knowledge and skills at each of the different performance levels of novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished. So these descriptors are used to provide a snapshot of the student's academic characteristics that are based on those scores. Again, back to range finding. So all of these activities have to take place prior to providing the student scores back. So because these have to take place, then we're going to have a bit of delay on getting the science individual student scores back to schools. And so, and because we have this new refreshed, we have to have a standard setting. So we're really looking for individual teachers, content area experts in science that would help build that, again, that range of expectation for our student performance. So these performance level descriptors also need to be used as part of reporting the student performance on each of those at those different levels. So we'll do this for the science as well as the alternate, or we have that for access testing, for alternate access. We have some activities related to the cut scores for alternate Kentucky summative assessment and in setting those. And then item development and review and bias review. So we've got these activities also happening aligned to writing and developing new items that are aligned to the Kentucky academic standards. KRS 158-6453 mandates that the Kentucky Department of Education release items annually, as well as student performance associated with those items. So every year we have to develop items, we have to field test items, because we're losing those items as part of the item bank. We have to replace those items. So we need teachers and content area experts to be part of item review, and then bias review. All the items go through bias and sensitivity review, and that is comprised of individuals that bring a diverse perspective, and so that they can offer feedback on those newly developed items to in regard to anything that may impact the students, like emotional, or whether those items have the possibility to discriminate against or give an advantage to students in one area over another. So all of our items go through content as well as bias and sensitivity. So if you know of a teacher that would be interested in these, we're looking for a number of teachers to be part of this committee work. And so the application is here and the link. If you have someone, please share that with them and be part of that exciting work. So let me pause there, turn it back over to Jana Beth.
So again, we really ask them to come along because we do need great teachers to be on these committees. So make sure to pass that application along. And thank you for the update on the current accountability system, which will also be in place for the 2026 year as it currently stands. So because remember, everything with the Cool Council and the United We Learn work is not going to the legislature until next spring. So anyway, we look forward to that. Our next SCAAC meeting is July 15th. We thank you for your participation, and we want you to block this date in. If by chance we get some new members, we will notify those of you who are still holding on, and we appreciate you. So again, July 15th, mark that down. We don't care if you have a beautiful sunny beach background, but we hope you'll be able to jump on the call and be with us on July 15th. So at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.